When President Truman announced that we were going to Korea, most Americans reacted as they did after Pearl Harbor. If we thought about protesting the war, we didn't do it. We were the silent generation. Americans enlisted by the thousands. Women again joined men in war plants to make up a third of the workforce. And some World War II veterans couldn't wait to see action again.
Gentlemen, do we, reserve officers of the armed forces and our countrymen, support our Commander-in-Chief in the dynamic action which he took yesterday?
In the years of the Korean War, America was paranoid about Soviet spies, communists in the government, and nuclear annihilation by the Russians.
The new age of atomic energy presses upon us. Mark that well. Civilization cannot survive an atomic war. Nothing would be left but a world reduced to rubble. Gone would be man's hopes for decency. Gone would be our hope for the greatest age in the history of mankind. An age which you and I know can harness atomic energy for the welfare of man and not for his destruction.
In the early 50s, home bomb shelters became big business. And a favorite party game was, who would you want with you in your shelter if you only had a week to live? When the Korean War ended, America was in a boom time. Jobs were plentiful as we used or exported everything we made. One of the things we used the most was the automobile. The cars of the 50s were inspired by our new jet fighters. Each year they were longer, lower, wider, more powerful, and less fuel efficient, with bigger, shinier fins. In 1955, gasoline cost 29 cents a gallon, and the average new car sold for $1,800. Early in the decade, Secretary of Defense Charles Wilson said that what was good for General Motors was good for the country. He was probably right. More cars meant more road building contracts and the explosion of suburbia. Between 1948 and 58, builders sold 13 million new houses, practically all with knotty pine rumpus rooms and two-car garages. There was a sameness about our ranch-style and split-level homes, but we didn't care. Sameness was the code of the decade. Shopping centers became the community centers for married women of the 50s. Suburban housewives seemed very young, and many were. The average marriage age for women dropped to 20 during the decade. Most young women did not want careers. They wanted husbands. So women invested heavily in clothes and cosmetics and dieted with Metrical, became Clairol blondes, and devoted themselves to helping hubby up the corporate ladder. Some companies set up courses to teach corporate wives what to say, how to act, even what clothes to wear. Businessmen had a dress code, too. Executives wore dark flannel suits, button-down shirts, and sincere neckties. If we were in advertising or the arts, a pink shirt was permissible. It was a sin to be different in the 50s, and certainly not the way to succeed at IBM or the Bank of America. Advertising reached a new low in tastefulness in the 50s and screamed out at us from everywhere. We were manipulated by Madison Avenue and bought luxuries like vinyl flooring, push-button phones, washer-dryers, soft drinks in cans, king-sized mattresses, and electric blankets. Between 1948 and 1955, our family income almost doubled to $5,600 a year. Installment buying became popular. We couldn't wait to spend the money we had and didn't have for the prepackaged good life. Families began to eat out more during the 50s. Most post-war houses were built without separate dining rooms. Parents began to feed their kids at the new fast food restaurants, or just drop them off someplace with a fistful of nickels and dimes. When we did stay home, we ate more and more artificially preserved junk food, which we boiled, toasted, popped in the oven, deep fried, or squirted out of cans. Teenagers of the 50s were mobile like their parents, and also had community centers. They hung around drive-in restaurants and drive-in theaters, any place with a parking lot. For suburban kids, school was still the social epicenter. During the 50s, almost every teenager belonged to some school-related something, and to someone. Grass was something we played on. A head was a captain, as in head cheerleader or head majorette. And in the parlance of the period, a pusher was anyone who shot from outside the foul line. That's the way we played it during the 50s. On January 1st, 1950, there were only 3 million television sets in America. But in that year, we bought another 7 million and made the big shift from radio to television. The first coast-to-coast coaxial cable was completed in 1951, and 40 million Americans watched President Truman speak at the Japanese Treaty Conference in San Francisco. In the first happy days of television, we were hypnotized by old Hopalong Cassidy movies. Friday Night Fights from New York, Howdy Doody, and Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. But our favorites were the weekly variety shows, like the Texaco Theater with Milton Berle, Arthur Godfrey and his friends, Toast of the Town with Ed Sullivan, and Your Show of Shows with Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca. In the 50s, nightly network newscasts became an established part of programming. John Cameron Swayze, Douglas Edwards, Huntley Brinkley, and Walter Cronkite were some of our early TV reporters. And Edward R. Murrow took television news out of the studio and into the world with his See It Now series. The first news event to captivate the whole country was the Senate investigation of organized crime. Chaired by Senator Estes Kefauver, the televised hearings in 1951 presented the first live look at the mafia and government ties with the mob.
Things you've done that you can speak of to your credit as an American citizen. If so, what are they?
Paid my tax.
Television had its own crime investigation when it was discovered that several of the big money network quiz games were rigged. Charles Van Doren was the most famous of the phony contestants. During the 50s, the situation comedy came into its own. Jackie Gleason and Art Carney in The Honeymooners were the biggest hit. The comedy superstar of the 50s was Lucille Ball. Beginning in 1951, I Love Lucy rated high with audiences every year. Most television drama during the decade was presented live. Programs like Actors Studio, Studio One, Kraft Television Theater, Robert Montgomery Presents, and the U.S. Steel Hour pioneered new plays, actors, and directors, and gave television some of its finest hours. Some TV dramas were filmed.
I delivered the message. Now what?
Now let's check the second message.
Ready?
Mum, the doctor's deodorant discovery now contains M3.
Television advertising in the 50s was inexpensive, so American business turned away from radio, and Madison Avenue began to bombard us with
Use Ajax, the foaming cleanser. Gets things clean, just like a whiz. You'll stop paying the elbow tax
When you start cleaning with Ajax.
So use Ajax, the foaming cleanser. Floats the dirt right down the drain.
I'm a guy who likes to work on my car. I like to take it apart and put it back together. I get to working on it and forget where I am, what time it is. I even forget to eat. You don't forget to smoke, though. I always smoke when I work. They go together. Why Marlboro? I like things that are well designed. This box is interesting and practical. Would you recommend Marlboro to your friends? I already have. New Marlboro. Filter, flavor, flip-top box.
Honestly, I hate the way these paper napkins keep sliding off your lap.
Madam?
Gracious, now I'm seeing things.
Oh, no. I'm Manners the butler, and I wish you'd try Kleenex table napkins. They won't slide off your lap.
Really? Why, it's true. Why, they cling like cloth.
And Kleenex table napkins are strong enough to last through the whole meal without shredding.
You'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent. The taste is new, so fresh and clean. That new taste really lasts, it's keen. And while it makes your smile a rave, it also makes your breath behave. So start going steady right away with Pepsodent. Get some today. You'll wonder where the yellow went when you brush your teeth with Pepsodent. Pepsodent, Pepsodent.
By the end of 1950, movie attendance was down 72%. Sure, we had our superstars, like Marilyn Monroe, Marlon Brando, and James Dean. But the biggest box office smashes were low-budget mutation movies.
Hi, once again, this is Dick Clark welcoming you back to American Bandstand. This should be about part number 3 of music and fun and frolic and special guest stars, leading off with Bobby Helms and Jack Willard.
Never in the history of the United States, a monster of such size and power.
unbelievable. Things like this just don't happen.
The thing that went wrong in the secret atomic laboratory afflicted him with the most hideous curse ever visited on man. One touch of the sun's bright rays transformed him into the reptilian, Jekyll and Hyde monstrosity who couldn't control his lust to kill.
What I saw you wouldn't believe. Watch men who deal in death, meet and fight. The invincible
First satellite creature to impregnate man with its chromosomes.
It's true. I can feel it inside. If you're driving a lonely road, you're as good as dead.
7 hours and his blood is still alive.
Something's wrong. I'm falling too fast.
Yankee right-hander Don Larson pitched a perfect game. Larson needed only 97 pitches to retire the Dodgers. It was the first perfect game since 1922 and the first World Series no-hitter in 53 years. Althea Gibson became the first black woman to win the U.S. National Grass Court Championships in 1957. When the lanky lady from Harlem won the women's singles at Wimbledon the same year, she probably did more for the black image than Ralph Bunche, the first black Nobel Prize winner. In 1959, another British sportsman tried to top the speedboat record. On the first run, Donald Campbell blazed by the timers at 275 miles an hour. Then, on the second pass, Campbell passed his old world mark again. Another new speed record at the end of the jet age decade. In the 1950s, women were still discouraged from competing in traditional male sports. But that didn't stop many from trying. The most exciting moment in sports of the 50s came in 1951, when Bobby Thompson walloped a 3-run homer in the bottom of the ninth to win the National League playoff for the Giants.
Down the line at third, not taking any chances. Locked in without too big of a lead at second, but he'll be running like the wind if Thompson hits one. Tracker throws. There's a ball strike. I saw me, I believe. The Giants win the pennant. 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 Bobby Thompson hits into the very back of the left field stand. The Giants win the pennant, and they're going crazy. They're going crazy.
In 1950, Senator Joe McCarthy charged that our State Department employed 200 known communists. McCarthy couldn't produce a single name, but this irresponsible accusation launched a 4-year witch hunt that ruined hundreds of innocent people. Since the start of the Cold War, many Americans were paranoid about communism at home. The government investigated 3 million federal employees. Teachers in some states were forced to sign loyalty oaths or lose their jobs. In Indiana, a member of the textbook commission claimed that Robin Hood glorified the Marxist philosophy because he robbed the rich to give to the poor. Senator McCarthy flourished in the Cold War atmosphere of suspicion and fear. Without evidence, he accused some of our best artists, entertainers, and government leaders of being communists, and convinced many of us that Reds in America controlled our minds and our lives. When he attacked the Army and their counsel, Joseph Welch, he went too far.
I get the impression that while you are quite an actor, you play for a laugh. I don't think you have any conception of the danger of the Communist Party.
Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness. If it were in my power to forgive you for your reckless cruelty, I would do so. I like to think I'm a gentleman. But your forgiveness will have to come from someone other than me.
May I say that Mr. Wells talked about...
Following the Army hearings, McCarthy was condemned by the Senate and became a national embarrassment. By 1954, most Americans were trying hard to disown him.
My name's Jimmy Stewart. Before I came home, I heard a lot of things that made me worry a little as to whether this was still the same America I grew up in. Of course, I wondered when I heard about a couple of crackpots here and there that wanted to make things different. Then I heard from...
During the McCarthy era, white Americans experienced violation of their civil liberties for the first time. They didn't like it. As soon as it was safe, many whites joined liberal causes and campaigned for political freedom.
I joined because I'm pretty grateful for the kind of country that gave me my break. And I've learned that all Americans are the same kind of people.
Shirley Temple.
At school, we were all taught the value of teamwork. Well, good grief, America was built by all of us working together. And our whole future depends on you helping him, and you helping her, and all of us helping each other. I'm for it.
Eddie Cantor.
You know, the most wonderful sound in the world is the laughter of a free people. No tyrant in history ever had a sense of humor or a sense of tolerance. Here in America, we have both. Let's keep them. Let's join the brotherhood.
Jennifer Jones.
One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That's America. And I love America. I know you do, too.
Katharine Hepburn.
Hate is a disease. People who talk hate and people who organize for hate are worse than typhoid carriers. If we want to keep our democracy healthy, we must wipe out this disease.
And here's Edward G. Robinson, who will read you the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to this basic ideal of my country. Fair play for all. I pledge myself to keep America free from the disease of hate that destroyed Europe. In good heart, I pledge unto my fellow Americans all of the rights and the dignities I desire for myself.
For black Americans in the early 50s, there were few enforced rights and even fewer dignities. At the start of the decade, blacks still didn't exist as people for many white Americans. But in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled that blacks must be treated as equals, starting with public education. The 9 justices ruled unanimously that racial segregation in classrooms was unconstitutional and that all states must proceed with deliberate speed to integrate their public schools. The decision caused a furor, especially in the Deep South. But the next year, the justices extended their desegregation orders even further to include public golf courses, swimming pools, playgrounds, and public parks. The same year, the Interstate Commerce Commission ordered the integration of interstate transportation and terminals. including this rest stop between Louisville, Kentucky and Nashville, Tennessee. Some conservatives resisted change with ropes and guns. Lamar Smith and Reverend George Lee were shot to death in Mississippi while registering blacks to vote. And a young clergyman from Alabama, Dr. Martin Luther King, was jailed for leading a massive black boycott against the bus company in Montgomery. In 1957, Governor Orville Faubus sent the Arkansas National Guard to stop the first blacks from entering Central High School in Little Rock. President Eisenhower federalized the Arkansas Guard and sent in the 101st Airborne to make sure integration kept moving. By 1958, many educators felt that the only people who cared about what went on in classrooms were Southern blacks trying to get in and Southern whites trying to keep them out. At liberal arts colleges, at least, students were more into campus life than calculus. And being a big man on campus and popular with peers had a much higher priority than getting good grades. The success of the Soviets in space changed our easygoing attitudes toward learning only a little. Most of us didn't worry about the science gap or Russia's superior education system. We were an overindulged, underpoliticized, apathetic generation of undergraduates. And so passive, one university president said of his 1959 graduating class, "Employers will love this group. They will be easy to handle. There won't be any riots." We listened to the learned educator. And we were very glad to know that our children would continue to be quiet, obedient, and respectful of authority, at least through the 60s and 70s.
I remember in the dark days of the histories, some of the same columnists, some of the same radio commentators who are attacking me now and misrepresenting my position were violently opposing me at the time I was after Alger Hiss. But I continued to fight because I knew I was right. And I can say to this great television and radio audience that I have no apologies to the American people for my part in putting Alger Hiss where he is today. And as far as this is concerned, I intend to continue to fight. Why do I feel so deeply? Why do I feel that in spite of the smears, the misunderstanding, the necessity for a man to come up here and bare his soul as I have, why is it necessary for me to continue this fight? And I want to tell you why. Because you see, I love my country. And I think my country is in danger. And I think the only man that can save America at this time is the man that's running for president on my ticket, Dwight Eisenhower.